G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to go through the top 3 exercises to treat plantar fasciitis. Like a lot of these videos, the first exercise is going to cover some symptomatic treatment. So we're going to show you how to treat the symptoms of your plantar fasciitis. But the next 2 exercises are going to try and attack the cause of that plantar fasciitis. And if you've been following along with these videos, we know that treating the symptoms, which is what we often do in physical therapy and in medicine in general, if we do that and neglect the cause, the underlying mechanical cause, then it's very hard for those symptoms to just magically go away and not want to come back again or keep coming back. So with these 3 top exercises for plantar fasciitis, we're hopefully going to cover some things to make you feel better in the short term, but also 2 things to work on over time to rid yourself of the mechanical compromises your bodies are making to end up with plantar fasciitis. So we'll get to those in a second. So basically with plantar fasciitis, as I'm sure many who have this are aware, it relates to the plantar fascia, which essentially connects from the ball of your feet to the heel. And a lot of people traditionally get a lot of pain at the base of their heel, more towards sort of the front of that heel a little bit more. Not so much at the back, that tends to be more Achilles. But the bottom of the heel and the base of that heel tends to be quite sore. When we get x-rays, we can often see that there's a bit of a bone spur sometimes in there because the load going through that plantar fascia has been altered for long enough that it's asked the bone to grow and to support that more. So we don't necessarily need that osteophyte or that bony growth to go away. But the point of all of this is to improve the way that you're loading this plantar fascia. If we just focus on that, as I said before, we're missing the point. And there's a lot of things that you can do for your symptoms, but one of the most important ones, one of the most simple ones is if you can get a ball. Tennis ball works really well. This is a lacrosse ball. You can use a golf ball if you game. The idea here is that plantar fascia somewhere is potentially overloaded, irritated. It might be inflamed. So despite what we sort of do with the ball, we don't necessarily have to be grinding away at the sore spot. But what we are looking for is tightness and stiffness in the system. So if there's a particular point that genuinely hurts you and it doesn't feel tight and thick and stiff and adhered or whatever the term you feel is, you don't necessarily have to be putting direct pressure on that. But what we can do mechanically is if there is a specific point that does hurt, everything around that is fair game. You can feed a lot of slack into that to take the load off that area and give your body permission to de-irritate that, de-inflame that and settle it down quickly. So how that looks basically is just by standing up. Hopefully you can still hear me here. But we want to make sure with the ball, it's very simple, you've probably seen this before, but we're just putting the ball underneath your foot. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can start with your heel on the ground, and you can just gently work from side to side, from the outside of your foot to the inside of your foot, just trying to find things that feel tender, try and peel that tissue apart. And then as you progress, you can start working your way back towards the heel a little bit more. Most people will probably feel a little bit more tender under the arch, and we'll get to why that is in a second. It all makes perfect sense. But once you can find some spots, you can gently put some pressure there. If you find a really tender spot, you can keep the pressure on there. You can sort of bend and flex your toes to try and shear that tissue past the ball. It's a modified sort of tack and floss or an active release technique. Working backwards and forwards, get some mobility and some motion back into those tissues. And then as you start to move towards the heel, what we can get you to do is we can flip it over and pop your toes on the ground and do the same thing through the heel. So we're starting on the outside, working our way inside, being careful not to hit anything that feels super, super tender, unless you feel like it's also very thick and tight as well. So for me, I don't have any real pain here, but I can feel just in this particular spot here is a little bit thickened. It feels a little bit gristly under there. So that tells me that this part of the tissue, this part of my plantar fascia, is being loaded up suboptimally. And part of the response to that is to thicken up that area, to tighten up that area, to support it. So we want to try and free that up, and hopefully you'll feel those symptoms sort of melt away a little bit after doing this. So you're spending 30 seconds a minute. You can spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes here if you want to. Watch some TV, be on your phone, do something at the same time. But the idea is you want to be able to find those tight spots and free them up. Now, so that's from a symptomatic perspective, and once you've done that, it should feel a little bit nicer, a little bit looser than it did beforehand. Now, with the next two exercises, like we said, we want to make sure that you feel very comfortable, that you understand why your plantar fascia is becoming a problem. And the easiest way to see this is to relate it back to what your arches do. So when we look at the arches of your feet on the inside here, mechanically we want your arches to be up. And a lot of people have flat arches or flat feet. And one of the problems with this is we look at it as an individual isolated problem. We look at your feet and say, well, you've got weak arches, you've got flat feet. But as you can hopefully see as I do this, flat feet aren't a foot problem, they're a leg problem. So if I keep my feet straight and rotate my knees and my legs inwards, you'll hopefully see that the arches, or the arch of my foot collapses. So it's not that the foot's floating around on its own and it's collapsing. The collapsed arch is a consequence of the entire leg de-rotating and rotating inwards, forcing that tissue to change the way that you're loading it. So we spoke about how crucial this is for Achilles issues and how that deorientates the tendon, and then when you try and use it normally, it's dealing with all these extra problems that it's not supposed to be dealing with, and it can become sore. So it's the same thing with the plantar fascia. So what we want to see basically is, with your feet straight, if you rotate your knees out without your feet moving, you should feel the muscles in your bottom engage, but more importantly, you should start to see the arches of your foot will lift up. Now we want to make sure that we promote this motion, this position, as often as possible. So the second exercise basically is we're going to look at the ankle. We're going to try and free up the ankle joint. The second exercise is going to be a hip mobility exercise. And what these two exercises will do is it will hopefully allow you to be in a more rotated position, give you more range of motion to play in. So instead of playing in this position and this being the only position that you can move and exist in, and having an arch that's collapsed and a plantar fascia that's poorly loaded, we want to give you that extra range of motion so that you can play in a more stable, mechanically sound and better orientated position, so your plantar fascia is loaded better. And then over time, that tissue should stop becoming sore and tender in the first place. So how does that look? So you would have seen this a fair bit if you've been watching the videos, but the banded ankle stretch is one of the best exercises I've seen as a physical therapist because it's so versatile, because ankle stiffness is such a problem, or a foundational problem in a lot of other aches and pains, from the ankle, the foot, all the way up to the hip. So the way we want to do this is we want to place a band like the power band. You can use any band that you've got. You just want something that's got some strong tension to it. Stretch it out as far as you can. Keeping your heel down, we want to bend that knee as far as you feel comfortable. Now, as we said before, if I move more front on, and again, if you can remember that the band's going back here, but the concept that we're trying to promote here is we want to make sure that when your ankle bends, that you're not bending and biasing to go around a stiffness. So again, if your ankle's stiff and your knee wants to come forwards, it runs out of range of motion, so it goes looking for the path of least resistance. So you can get further in your ankle stretch if you let your knee cave in, because it's a bad position, it's a compromised position. So for the purposes of this and for the health of your plantar fascia, we want to make sure that your foot's straight, your toes are down. You want that knee to be rotated out as far as you feel comfortable before your toes and your heel wants to lift. And we want to be, as you'll see, in sort of this plane as opposed to this plane. So traditionally we look at knee over middle toe, but for the purposes of this, we want your knee out as wide as you can possibly go and then go out in that plane. We want you to hold this. So the band, imagine the band's pulling behind. So to reorientate that, so again, foot straight, knees out as wide as I can get it. And I want to stay here for about 30 seconds to a minute, 2 minutes if you can. We can also oscillate in and out of that range. And what this exercise is doing is using the band, we're trying to bias the deep joint stiffness. So we're not necessarily trying to stretch your calves or stretch any other muscles around your ankle. We're trying to get into the deep rustiness that often sort of occupies most ankles in today's modern world. So trying to free that up and spend some time here. And then what you hopefully find is when we're doing that rotated position, you should feel like there's automatically more give and more range. So you've got a greater ability to put your foot and your entire leg in a more stable, functional position. So the second part of this basically And the third exercise overall is we've addressed some of the symptoms of the plantar fascia itself. We're trying to unglue that stiff ankle at the bottom. We also need to go after some of the restrictions at the hip that are stopping that leg from being allowed to rotate out. And one of the best ways we can do this is via an external rotation stretch. So if you've got the flexibility to do this, obviously the floor makes it a bit more difficult, but if you can do it on a chair, that would also help. But the idea is you want to lift your leg up, put it up here, we can gently push down through this knee. We're trying to facilitate that rotation, the same as what we're trying to do when we're squatting, when we're moving. So this is obviously a tough position for a lot of people. So what we can do is, if you have a chair, we can get into this pigeon stretch, which was shown a few times already on the channel. So again, you can have this leg up on a bench or a seat or a bed. What we want to get you to do here is externally rotate that foot, try and drop your knee to the ground, and we're looking to feel some tightness in those glutes. And these glutes are often the things that stop that knee from being able to rotate out and keep your arch in a good position and improve the way that you're loading that plantar fascia. So again, we want to stay here and take a deep breath in, squeeze, tense all the muscles in your glutes, tense all the muscles in your thigh, push your foot down into the ground, hold that for a few seconds, and then relax. And what you should hopefully find is that you can then drop down a little bit deeper and just repeat that process. And then once you've done that, again, what you'll hopefully see is your ability to get that leg out improves further again. So for me, I probably should have tested this out to start with. That one probably goes to here. This one now feels like it rotates more. So what those exercises are going to do is, when you're going about your day-to-day life, if you're walking, running, regardless of what it is, we want to be able to put that leg in a much more functionally stable and supported position, so that the plantar fascia all the way down at the end of that chain is being loaded up the way that it's designed to be loaded up. And then over time, as those symptoms start to regress, you're actually fixing the problem. Now, excuse me. So one of the things that often happens with plantar fasciitis is that we often end up in shoes with arch supports and all these sorts of things, and they should always be thought of as a symptomatic treatment. They're not a cure. The only way to cure these things is to change and reorientate the leg in a better position. Otherwise, you're not fixing anything. It's literally just a band-aid. So any cortisone injections, orthotics, shoe inserts, taping, strength exercises, all the soft tissue work through your calf, through the sole of your foot to try and mobilize everything. It can be very helpful in the short term, but long term you can't get past these things, or it's less likely that you'll get past these things unless you go for those broader mechanical things with your ankle and your hip. So hopefully that's useful information for you. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, let us know in the comments below. Alternatively, if you do like these videos, please register a like below and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps us, but it also helps these videos and this information, which is information that we talk with our patients about every day, this actionable, useful information that works. It allows that information to reach more people. And scrolling through sort of YouTube and a lot of the videos on plantar fasciitis and a lot of things as well, they're really old videos, a lot of them, and a lot of the information in those videos is probably outdated, and the way that we look at these things shouldn't be plantar fasciitis as just being a foot problem. It's connected to everything else, and if we're not looking at that broader connection, it's really hard to not only make your symptoms feel better, but to keep them away and fix a problem. So if you enjoyed the video, please let us know, and we're bringing them out daily. So if you have any questions or any suggestions on what you would like us to cover, please let us know as well. But until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.